Hello and welcome to An Evening with Nirvana. It's a podcast where I will be talking to a series of guests from the Doom community, maybe some people outside of it, about level design, map creation, and other facets of game development. My guest today is Archie, who you will most likely know from his Slaughterfest Rush, New Gothic Movement 2, and various other community projects like Whitemare, A.L.T and the Slaughterfest series. How are you doing today, Archie?
Hello, I'm doing fine.
Nice, it's great to have you on. I start every podcast asking the same kind of boring question, which is, how did you get into Doom in the first place?
All right. Uh, Doom was among other PlayStation games I had back in the 90s.
Oh.
Uh, I actually don't know why, but I really like that game more than anything else,
Mm-hmm.
even though it didn't really look that great in comparison to other games. Sometime later, the PlayStation was exchanged to PC. It didn't have Doom, but I eventually I found the pirate CD in like 2005
Mm-hmm.
with Doom. It, but since it was a pirate CD, it also had some extras, and
Ah,
it had Legacy Doom source pod. It was actually very handy because the Windows XP didn't really play well the original Doom. So having a source port back then was a blessing, to be honest, because the internet wasn't really well. It was uh, in some cities here, but not in my case.
right. So PlayStation Doom was your first introduction to Doom. That's interesting.
Yep.
Hmm. And what did you think? Like, because the PlayStation version is quite different from the PC version. Were there things you preferred about the PlayStation version when you finally played the PC one?
Well, I think the sounds are much better on PlayStation version.
Uh,
Also, I like the music and overall atmosphere.
mhm. Yeah, a lot of people seem to have that opinion, and you see like a lot of sort of PlayStation Doom for PC stuff these days because of that. Um, so when did you actually start like making maps for Doom? When did you got this legacy Doom editor, right? And then you started making maps. Was that like almost immediately that you started making them?
Yeah, almost. I don't quite remember the like year, but I think it was like 2006.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the old builders. The It was called Deep Sea,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
mapping tool. Yeah, I've got a shareware version of it
Mm-hmm.
of the internet. It was since I was pretty limited in access to the internet. It was dial-up, I think, back then.
Uh huh.
So it was slow, and you couldn't really spend too much time on it because it was kind of expensive.
Mm-hmm.
There was no really any learning materials for it, so I was just messing around. It took me quite a while to understand how all this stuff works. Like, I think that at today's beginner level,
Mm-hmm.
I I've reached it only by like after a year maybe,
Yeah.
because I had no learning material, and program
Mm-hmm.
was also in English, which I wasn't really good at.
Oh yeah, sure. Because I guess they wouldn't have had like a Russian version or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. Who would have did it back then?
Yeah, and also, I mean, the tools themselves were just more difficult to use too. Like these days with Doom Builder, it's so easy to put a map together compared to back then.
Yeah, but also Deep Sea was had such features which Doom Builder didn't have even now.
Hmm. Like what?
There were like arch creations and well, door builders was, I think, a bit better. There was
Right.
some really neat quirks in it,
Hmm.
which Doom Builder didn't have.
Well, there you go. They need to look back at Deep Sea to start adding new features, apparently. Um, so when did you actually start getting into like P-WODs? Like when did you find other people's WODs online?
Yeah, I found the site iDedicated.ru, the Doom Power,
Yep.
or we also call it RDC, stands for Russian Doom Community.
Yep.
So I found that site, and there were a lot of PWATs. So I started downloading them and playing them
Mhm.
on Legacy Doom.
Yeah. Do you remember like what the first ones that you got into, or like what the first one that really like was exciting for you?
Uh, I think among the first ones there was the mod called 10 Sector.
Oh, okay. And
Also,
oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, I think now that I think about it, there were a lot of mods. But I can't really remember the names right now.
Hmm. But like, did you find like a lot of those old sort of the '90s big ones like Memento Mori and that kind of stuff early, or
Actually, no.
no?
I've
Okay.
only played like Alien Vendetta,
Oh yeah.
and I don't really remember playing Memento Mori at all back then. I
Hmm.
played Requiem, I think.
Uh-huh. Was Alien Vendetta like, was that a big deal for you? A lot of people have cited Alien Vendetta as like a big influence for them.
Yeah, I think it was quite nice. But to be honest, I think most influential back then were Zdoom What's I played.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think.
So I wasn't really like a vanilla or boom player back then. I
Sure.
preferred Zdoom and something new.
Yeah, I think I was actually kind of the same when I came in to the community. Like a lot of my first PWADs were ZDoom things, the like the ZDoom compilation maps, the big community maps where they like a bunch of different mappers came together and put like they built one gigantic map. I remember those were like a really big deal for me when I first like found custom PWADs. And I think a lot of people just like thought ZDoom was going to be what everyone would play. So
Yeah,
uh,
I kind of remember the same.
yeah. Uh,
Um,
sorry, you go.
yeah, I was about to say that it changed after I met some speedrunners
Hmm.
because Zdoom is not really well suited for speedruns, and it isn't really the same as vanilla.
Yeah,
The physics are different, and it just feels different a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Stuff like the movement is a lot more floaty and small things, hitboxes, block maps, flying monsters, stuff like that. Uh, so you made a lot of maps like early on for Doom Power, and for Doom World. What would you say were like the main differences between like the Russian community and the English one when it came to things like mapping and community projects and stuff?
Well, first of all, the RDC is a lot smaller than Doom World,
Uh-huh.
like a lot,
Yeah.
and you can literally talk with every person in it.
Uh-huh.
While talking with everyone in the world is probably impossible.
Uh-huh.
Um, so the community was small, and it kind of didn't really contact with Doom World either.
Yeah.
So it was like people were influencing each other inside that small group.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And I mean, it must have been for you pretty great. I would imagine, to find out that there was like a community for Russian like Doom mappers specifically at the time.
Yeah, it was nice to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Every person was quite individual. Well, they they still are.
Mm.
It was really hard to find, people with the same style in mapping or same views on how to make things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is
It
interesting.
it kind of it kind of similar to Doom World, but in Doom World, I think you can actually find people who have literally the same views
Yeah.
on mapping, but on RDC it was so small that literally everyone had their own quirks, their own little things they make that distinct them from each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people on Russian Dom community value different things in mapping.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the majority, of course. Not talking about individuals.
Sure.
But the majority, I think they don't really value gameplay that much.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the reason you can find some really quirky maps out there, and they're quite popular.
Hmm. So, what do you
On the
think
other,
they sort of value over gameplay then?
I think they value more like aesthetics and the feelings the maps give.
Uh huh.
I can kind of relate to that, actually.
Oh, right. That's kind of interesting there because I mean, we'll get to it in detail a bit more later, but I think of Rush as like a very gameplay oriented WOD. Like, it's very much the gameplay feels like the centerpiece for Rush to me.
Yeah, it actually is. But I think that gameplay can actually be part of aesthetics as well and
Sure.
can give you a certain feeling too.
Hmm. Um.
It shortens the amount of people who might enjoy it, though. Like, if you make map, everyone can play and make it like feel some sort of emotion in it.
Mm,
Then more people would like it than if you make map that actually requires you to struggle to you know
yeah. If it's based around
y-
like a challenge or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't really a big challenge, but I think some people actually dropped rush at like map 7 because they just didn't really enjoy the challenge it provided to them.
Mm. Well, yeah, it's interesting that like that you think the Russian community was sort of looking for maybe atmosphere and like and things like that instead.
Yeah.
Mm. Uh, so Hero's Tale, I think it's like one of the first community projects, at least according to the Doom Wiki that you were a part of, and it said that that was sort of created during speed mapping sessions. Was this like your first introduction to the idea of speed mapping?
Yeah, it was. The first session I participated in was speed mapping session number 3. The theme for that speed mapping session was the city, just city.
Mhm.
And I've made my first speed map during that speed mapping session, and it eventually became map 9 in Heroes Tales.
Right.
Uh, and I think it didn't even really get changed at all in the release.
Mhm. And uh, I guess sort of back then and also more recently, do you generally find speed mapping to be like a useful tool for you when creating maps?
Yeah, speed mapping is a really helpful tool. First of all, because it actually forces you to finish the map.
Yep.
Because like a lot of people struggle to actually finish their map,
Uh-huh.
and that's like a major problem I find among certain people. It's not like a big issue for like in a community size, but for some people it's actually a big problem. They start mapping and they keep mapping, keep adding stuff, and can't finish it because of it. Like they lose interest eventually and just drop it. Even though the map could be like separated into 5 different maps along
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, I agree that one of the biggest things with speed mapping is I think it forces you to start and it forces you to finish, because I think the other problem people have is like they look at a blank sort of screen in Doom Builder and they don't know sort of how to begin. And I think speed mapping really helps you just sort of draw stuff.
Yeah. Speed mapping is not the only restriction I think is helpful.
Yeah.
There are other stuff like you can force yourself to not make maps larger than like 5 minutes, or you can actually force yourself to make map that will play in vanilla. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're like into making little details for like hours, and that makes you stop finishing the map because you just keep mapping, keep making little details. In this case, yeah, I think you can force yourself to make a map that would be playable in vanilla.
Yeah. Figure out kind of what your weakness is, and then and then use restrictions to like make sure you finish something. It's a good idea.
Yeah, or at least you can actually like try something new. That's useful as well.
Mm-hmm. Have you had situations where you were working on a project like Rush or New Gothic 2 or something, and you didn't know how to start a map and you used speed mapping to kind of just build something quickly?
Most maps in Rush are actually speed maps, except for like map 12, map 6,
Right.
also, and like the bigger maps. The smaller maps, I think map 3 is the first one I've made. It was during a speed mapping session on RDC.
Mm-hmm.
It would have eventually ended up being in Whitemare 2, I think,
Oh, okay.
but I took all my maps from it. So yeah, I don't have any maps in Whitemare 2 because of it. I
Oh,
I
right.
took all my maps and put them into Rush. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just about to get to Whitemare, which is maybe like one of the better known of your sort of early WODs that you worked on. Do you remember like what the goals for that project were originally?
Whitemare was literally the same. Had literally the same sort of ideas behind as Heroes Tales. It was
Right.
just a bunch of speed maps put together. Also, some extras. Like Heroes Tales didn't have all maps as speed maps. Some maps were made after the speed mapping sessions, and same with Whitemare.
Right. Okay. Uh, and like playing through Whitemare, like playing through your maps. They're all sort of completely different. Like map 3 is pretty straightforward Doom combat, and then map 7's like this weird puzzle map using the 666 trigger effect, and then 31 is like puzzle platforming. Did you deliberately try to make something different for each slot?
Yeah, I usually try to make all my maps distinct from each other. As for map 31, I the only reason I made it that way because I picked the music first and thought that this music would fit a map without monsters.
Oh, okay. And how often do you pick your like? How often do you choose the music before you start a map? Is that common for you?
Yep, uh, quite often. I think most of my like better maps are made that way. I like to listen to music and think what kind of map would fit that music.
Yeah, Rubik's was saying that he's the same way, and he tends to. I mean, obviously he composes MIDI, so he'll often like compose a MIDI and then he'll listen to that as he builds a map, and then so he'll be listening to the MIDI sort of over and over as he's building the map. Do you ever do the same kind of thing?
Yeah, except I don't really compose music myself.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I usually just play that music while I make map.
Hmm.
Usually, I actually, in the end, I might change the MIDI to something different if I think like that MIDI would actually fit better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm listening to one MIDI, but in the end, I might put something else because I think like this is gonna fit much better.
Yeah, I suppose Rubik's also does it so that he can make sure that like listening to it for a long period of time won't get annoying for the player, which can be like an important aspect of Doom Minis, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
so with Sacrament, this was made with your mapping clan, which was called BOS, and so mapping clans, like, they're not really a thing on the English forums. Like on Doomworld and stuff, that wasn't necessarily a thing. What was the purpose of having a mapping clan back then?
I would actually not call it a mapping clan, more like a mapping team.
Okay.
But just a team of map makers, led by one person who would actually like tell everyone what the idea they have and what we're gonna make.
Hmm.
So I can actually tell about clans back then. There was a period of time we call era of clans nowadays. As more people were getting access to the internet, newcomers would come to the community
Yeah.
and they would see like people with clan tags, and that made them like feel like they are not complete. They want a clan too.
Hmm.
So there was an era and people would like make a lot of clans just for the sake of it.
Hmm.
But BOS wasn't really part of that time. It was created much earlier. I
Uh huh.
think the reason it was created was to just make a mapping team, not really a clan. They did play some online Doom though, not really like everyone else.
Right. Was there sort of like a competitive element, like we want our team's maps to be better than this other team, or not so much?
No, it was the only mapping team like that. So yeah, it's not a common thing at all. It's the only thing I think. Like the only clan that had idea like that.
Okay. So Alt, which is sort of that's another pretty famous early Russian Doom community WOD, I think. Uh, in that WOD, your maps are pretty cramped. They're very atmospheric, and there are a lot of custom sounds in that WOD that sort of make it feel pretty unique. What are the main things you remember about making maps for that project?
Well, A.L.T actually started as a project of Azamayo and me back in 2010.
Hmm.
He eventually disappeared, and his project was picked up by BOS. I have started making 5 maps to it, but only 2 of them were somewhat closer to completion. So these maps were finished without me being involved at the project at all.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not part of alt at all. It was like my leftovers, which were finished by them. I think they did a good job finishing them because I remember them being a bit dull, to be honest. And in release, they got a little bit better at least. So it's a good thing.
Hmm.
Also, there was a little quirk in the project. We had to write down the exact time we started making up. So I know that my first map I have started creating on 26th of January in 2010
Oh wow.
at 18 hours, well, 6 p.m. and 8 minutes. It
Wow.
was Psychedelia, yeah, the first map. And the freeze I started creating at 31st of January at 21 hours and 16 minutes.
That's cool. That's I feel like people should start doing that with projects again. It's kind of cool to
Yeah,
be
it
able to
was
look
quite nice.
back and see exactly when you started and finished something, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It was quite nice to just open that TXT file I have right now. It's from 2010 again.
Yeah.
It has like 5 maps, but two of them are like 1%. One of the maps was actually supposed to be snowy,
Uh-huh.
but you know, because the SML actually disappeared, I didn't continue any of the maps.
Right. Well, I
I
was going to
started
ask
with
you about snowy maps because you seem to like the theme. Is there a particular reason? Like, do you like to just work with those textures, or do you think it creates like a cool atmosphere? Or
well, the real reason I made so many was to add continuity in my VODs, like in Rush and Rush 2. But I do like the Snow team nonetheless.
uh,
Snow team is not covered well enough, I think.
yeah, I guess. I think Doom only really had like two kind of. It had like an icy wall, the whatever it is, SP rock, and then the M floor that goes with it, and that I think that was it. So yeah, definitely an underappreciated theme, the snowy one, and also in there was gonna be that snow map in Sunlost, map 24, but they ended up changing the theme for it to something completely different. So missed out. Uh,
Well, I do think some changes in Sunlust were unnecessary.
hmm. Well, you tested quite a lot of the maps, didn't you?
Yeah, I've tested pretty much all of them before the release.
What changes did you think should have maybe stayed the same?
I think I liked map 5, which would eventually be the Summer of 69, I think. What was it called again?
Yep, that was it. So you
Yeah.
prefer the original map 5?
Well, both versions are okay. I think the old version was okay as well. Not really that bad to be just put aside.
Well, Danny did say that they thought those maps were still good enough that they wanted to release them. So I guess at least they got to come out as Summer '69.
Yeah, it's okay, I guess. At least some way they were released.
Yeah. With Slaughterfest 2012, you made map 14 for it, and I feel like before this point, most of your stuff wasn't particularly slaughtery. What made you want to make a map for Slaughterfest?
Well, I actually appreciated Slaughter back then,
Yeah.
and I tried to make some slaughterish encounters before, but couldn't incorporate large quantities of monsters into a map the way I'd like it to play
Mhm.
because I had some, the ideas behind my maps were kind of similar to the original game. Like you had to make progressions of weapons. You had to make like fill areas with just simple enemies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it couldn't really work well with the slaughter. So I tried to change something. So I tried to make a map that would be nothing like that I made before.
Yeah.
So yeah, and like I actually tried to make a map similar to something PHML would make. Like I thought he could have made.
Yeah.
It's not really. It didn't really play but well like a PHML map. I think
Well, it didn't.
it turned to be something unique. I think.
Yeah, I do think of it as pretty unique in that set. Actually, it's one of the maps that I always remember. Uh, and I'm not sure what it is about it. Just the way the fights play out and the fact that it's sort of segmented into these little sections. And also like the opening is like quite rude. That initial sort of bit where the everything raises out of the floor. I think it's when you get the plasma gun or something. I'm not sure, but
I don't quite remember that map very well right now.
yeah.
Actually, that map in the Slaughterfest 2012 was changed a lot. My initial map had a little bit different road, and it was changed by Jario and Danny, I think.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's quite different. It also had a secret which required an R12 jump before, but
Oh,
they changed it,
okay.
and I think it was for better.
A bit too rude, maybe at the time. Did you have Did you have some influences like from the Slaughter community outside of PHML at that time?
Yeah, New Gothic Movement 1 and Sunder and Hell Revealed 2. There were like smaller and less known maps like Ashen Garden by Skepticist.
Yeah, I like that map. I think you told me to play it. In fact, Ashen Garden.
Yeah, maybe. Well,
Yeah.
Ashen Garden was made by Skepticist after I overwhelmed him with requests to make a map.
Sometimes you
I
have to do
was
that.
really annoying to some people to actually start making some stuff back then. It paid well in some cases.
Yeah, I remember enjoying it. Was it was it before or after Skeplin then?
It was his first map.
Oh, it was before. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
people should check it out because I think people have heard of Skeplin, but definitely not Ashen Garden. I definitely wouldn't have played it if you hadn't told me about it. So it is a fun one. Uh, Rush is, I mean, that's maybe the WOD that you're best known for. That and I think New Gothic Movement 2, probably the other one. Um, and it's sort of become like the go-to recommendation for people who want to get into Slaughter. Like if someone's like, how do I like what's a good WOD to start with if I want to start playing Slaughter WODs? A lot of the time, people will recommend Rush. What were your goals for difficulty with Rush?
I think Rush was actually like something that I can't really reproduce right now because Rush was also one of the WODs in during the development of which I wasn't really a good player. But like you know, I think I was like at the level of beating Plutonia at best
Right.
back then. So I've made each encounter something like, what if? How can I beat this?
Okay.
And stuff like that. So yeah, there wasn't really any goals for difficulty, but I was thoroughly testing each map as well. So I would start from the start. If I make something and I want to test it, I would start from the start and play through each section of the map without any cheat codes or like starting later or skipping some stuff.
Right.
So I will play each section a lot of times, and if I feel like I'm taking too much damage here, this might be too hard, this might kill certain people, I would nerf it. And if I think like this is way too easy, this should be harder, I'd make it harder and stuff like that.
Mhm. So yeah, like I suppose that probably helps with like ammo and health balancing if you're constantly playing from the beginning all the way to the end instead of jumping ahead.
Yeah, that helps a bit. But also, as if you're a good player, you would eventually think like this is way too easy. I'm gonna make it much harder,
Hmm.
and the map will become way too hard after a while. If you're a good player and try to do this, like testing the approach of mine back then.
Hmm. Well, I think what it speaks to though is that you were making something that was like like fun and a challenge for you, which I think
Yeah.
generally is like that's the best way to map, really, in my opinion. Like you should be
Yeah, I
making
think
stuff
so.
that's
So.
enjoyable for you and like gives you a reasonable challenge. But you should be able to beat it yourself without it being too hard, I think.
Not just that. I think replayability is also a key point to this.
Yeah.
Like if you think like I can beat this, but I don't really want to. This is kind of annoying fight, or this might be kind of hard to me. I'm gonna like approach this small, or I mean, slower.
Yeah.
So yeah, while I was making I had to play through each section a lot of times. So I would make for myself a way to go faster through each section.
Uh-huh.
I think this is also why kind of it kind of good for speed running as well.
Yeah, for sure. And uh I do seem to remember you saying maybe this was for lower difficulty settings, but I remembered you saying that you wanted to make sure you could like reality the fights, like not take any damage. Is that the case? Was that for lower difficulty settings?
No, it was the original thought of mine. I tried to make all fights reality friendly for as much as possible,
Uh-huh.
but not like this should be played as reality. No, that wasn't
Okay.
the main idea. But the reason I thought that way because I think if player takes some unavoidable damage, like you're forced to take some damage, then I thought it was pretty bad and frustrating.
Uh-huh.
I don't really think so anymore because actually there's another aspect of gameplay which you can incorporate in the minimizing of unavoidable damage.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have to take damage, then you should take damage, the lower damage. You should take the lower damage. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I mean.
And also maybe if you force the player to take damage in some instances, it can push the player to sort of move to spots where there's health and things like that. Like it can force player movement, I suppose, in fights too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think it can be fun. Like the another aspect of strategy of how you play the map.
Yeah. And did you sort of take that same testing process you had for Rush and use it for things that you made after it, or was that mostly just for Rush?
Yeah, I tried to do the same thing for later maps, but once I become a bit better at it, the maps became quite hard
Yeah.
actually, because I just felt like this is way too easy. This can be harder. This is not really fun. But
Hmm.
I tried to, I think like this is not how I want to make the maps work. So, and I tried to like wait a little bit and play them again, and I would find the hard spots straight away.
Yeah, that is actually a
And
good technique. I've come back to maps like later on when you've forgotten all the perfect strategies for it, and then you realize like, oh no, like there are ammo issues here and stuff.
yep.
Yeah. Do you think do you think maybe these days things are a little bit too tight when it comes to slaughter? Like, do you think there's a bit of a lack of the looser, maybe slightly easier slaughter that there used to be?
Well, I do prefer an easier slaughter maps, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I don't really play that many watts nowadays,
Hmm.
so I can't really tell. I think like I played some stuff, but and it felt like this is not really hard, but at the same time it was kind of frustrating to play. So it's kind of hard to say what exactly is making me not like the map, or what exactly makes me like the map on the other hand.
Yeah, sure. Uh, what what made you want to use the Swim with the Whales palette and the textures and stuff for Angular? Did you just really enjoy Swim with the Whales as a one?
I had a nice MIDI that would fit Swim with the Whales, and I just wanted to make a map that looks like Swim with the Whales.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I just used the Swim with the Whales as a resource pack.
Mm-hmm.
It's also kind of nice to, just try something new. You just pick a different resource pack and work with it. Because I usually work with the same resource pack I use for most of my maps.
Yeah, Archie
And
text, right? I've used that
yeah,
myself here and there.
nice.
Uh, so you've worked on like a lot of community projects over the years, and you had your clan or mapping team that you worked with as well. Do you generally enjoy collaborating with other mappers more than making solo projects, or do you enjoy both equally?
I think I like working with someone else a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but some maps, way I'd like to make myself, of course.
Yeah, and what do you like? What do you enjoy about the collaborating process? Like, is it nice to just be able to maybe like speed map something and then send it off to someone else to finish, or uh, do you sort of like being able to like bounce ideas off somebody else?
I like the aspect of uh, expecting something unusual from the cooperation. Like if you send the map and the map gets updated, and you look at the updates and you like see what's the ideas behind of a different person were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I'm making a map with Ben Dragami right now, and it's great sending a map to him and then getting it back because he just does stuff that I never would have thought to do, and then it helps me to like build the next section with something that I probably never would have come up with if he hadn't built the other thing. So
Yeah, I think the best example for my cooperation would be the how was it called? I forgot. 1 second.
there's a new Gothic movement too. I was about to get to that.
No, it was Fuel Devourer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a map by C14T and me.
Mm-hmm.
It was much simpler before he added some interesting ideas to the map. So I felt like, yeah, this is much better than it was before. Like the map originally looked like it's like the Doom 1
You're right.
map, but with changes added to it later, it became like something reality looking. Well, as much as Doom can do it.
Yeah, of course. I mean TNT, the truck, just like real life.
Oh yeah.
How did you get involved with Armored Blood for New Gothic Movement 2?
Uh, I well, I trying to remember right now. I think he was just streaming mapping on Twitch,
Mm-hmm.
and I just came in and said hi. And after a while, I just said, "Hey, let's finish Gothic Movement too." He was like, "Okay, that's it."
Well, because you said it was sort of something that, like New Gothic Movement, the original, was something that you were influenced by
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah. I like older Slaughter maps, not for the gameplay, but for their sheer epic or the emotion they give. Like you're looking at the dozens and hundreds of enemies, and you're like pushing through, and there is a gigantic architecture in it. It's a completely different feeling
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
from like our original maps or from most maps people make. So yeah, the main reason I like Slaughter was actually not for the Slaughter aspect of it. I think Slaughter
Yeah.
aspect is actually pretty kind of boring. It's kind of not really. How do I say it? It can become quite boring after you play it so many Slaughter maps.
Right.
Like you're holding left mouse button and wait for like two minutes for all the Hell Knights to die. That's not really interesting, I think.
Oh, I don't know. Holy hell, pretty good in my opinion.
I think Holy Hell is actually interesting because, well, for the history aspect of it.
All right. Oh, so, how did you feel about Sunder then, playing that for the first time?
I actually liked Sander a lot
Hmm.
back then because I also wasn't really good at it. So it gave me quite some new experience. It was
Hmm.
quite interesting.
And obviously known for sort of the giant architecture and the atmosphere and everything.
Yeah, that's exactly why I liked it as well.
Hmm. Uh, so because New Gothic Movement 2 was a sequel to New Gothic Movement, did you actually go back and play through any of the maps from the original to get a sense of what you wanted to do with the new maps, or did you just sort of build new maps without thinking about it?
Yeah, I actually went back and played some of the maps I liked
Hmm.
from New Gothic Movement 1. And also, when I joined New Gothic Movement 2, uh, Armored Blood already made 5 maps for it. I only like changed one of it, one of them. I felt like adding some details to it,
Uh-huh.
and that's it.
And were you aiming for a certain difficulty level with the set, or were you just making maps that the two of you enjoyed playing? Like, were you trying to aim for the same sort of difficulty level as New Gothic Movement 1?
No, I was like making maps. I felt like it would be fun to play. That's it.
Hmm.
So the same thing like in Rush and other maps,
Okay, yeah.
except like Slaughterfest 3. In Slaughterfest 3, I didn't hold myself back,
Right.
or I did actually, but but because I felt like this is way too much. This is way too hard. This is like borderline frustrating and annoying.
Hmm. And well, yeah, for Slaughterfest 3, I did sort of think your maps in that have like some pretty tight setups in the sense that like making mistakes is pretty punishing. Were you trying to make them much more punishing than your usual maps then?
I just felt like I should make them as hard as possible for the because it is a Slaughterfest after all. And I
Right.
felt like Slaughterfest was always this tight, like the maps I made. But because I was much worse back then, and I'm much better after a while, you know the difference between my current skill level and skill level when I was first playing Slaughterfest 2012.
Hmm.
And I tried to incorporate the same feeling I had when I was playing Slaughterfest 2012. Man, I'm doing this way harder than I should.
Right. Yeah. Uh. Well, it is interesting because I think you often do make like more difficult, less fun things when you're worse at the game. Sometimes I think like
That's that might be the case, yeah, because like someone plays, say Sander, and says this is way too hard for me, but because they are not really good at the game, they will then try to make the similar stuff
yeah,
because yeah, they feel like they like people like Sander. I should make something like Sander, but they
exactly. Yeah.
don't really make something like Sander. They make something worse.
Well, also I think the testing process. if you're a worse player, your testing process is generally not as good. Like you will save scum to be your own fights and things like this, which can lead to fights being like way out of your own skill level a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, but I also don't think that mappers should really try their best to make the maps they want. Like can beat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If people enjoy their maps the way they are, then maybe they should just make them that way.
Oh yeah, well I think that's the key thing is like they should enjoy them. I guess I just wonder sometimes if people who makes things like very above their own skill level actually enjoy them when they sort of play test them and things like that.
I don't think that they might playtest them at all.
Yeah, maybe not. Uh, so Slaughterfest 3 obviously kind of notorious for taking a long time to come out. Do you remember sort of what happened with the project that made it like difficult to release?
Uh, I kind of don't actually.
Oh, okay.
Just so happened to be like on hiatus,
Right.
and no one was finishing it, and then Rubik's took it over, and then I took it over and just released it. Like I put everything together and released it. I think there was a one nasty bug in the release version, but that was fixed pretty quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it. So in the end, we were just like, let's get rid of this project. Let's not look at it anymore. This took way too long. It
Yeah,
was 5 years.
yeah, 5 years, that is quite a long time. Uh, did you work with Rubik's on map 16 of that as it was being made, or did you come in after the fact to like finish the map off?
I don't quite remember how it happened, but I was finishing that map. But then he changed a little bit of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't finished back then I took it over.
Okay, so you weren't sort of sending the map back and forth to each other during the time. You just sort of came in and touched some stuff up.
Yeah, I picked the map and finished it and sent back to Rubik's, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite remember. It was like 4 years already.
Yeah, long time. So uh, for you, when you had to like finish the project off, uh, was it difficult to get everything together and contact everybody? Like, was the process of releasing it a bit of a challenge?
I don't really think I contacted anyone. Just fixed some bugs and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were just well. I think it was me and the monologist and the Rubik's. We just
Just trying to get it out of the door as quickly as
yeah
possible,
yeah
really.
that's it.
Uh, so like generally speaking, what kind of gameplay do you feel like you enjoy overall? And like, do you think difficulty is a central part of it? You talk about atmosphere being the big thing for you. Uh, do you think there are points where like difficulty hurts the enjoyability of a map?
Well, yeah, I think difficulty is it's a tough question
Yeah,
because difficulty is subjective.
yeah, of course.
I so I can speak for myself because I don't really like maps which are way too hard or require way too much luck.
Mm-hmm.
But the most problem the, the hardest so yeah the biggest problem is I think if the map is actually boring. So
Okay.
like if you have to like use strats which are not fun to play, like having to cover a lot, and killing a lot of hit scanners because of it. So like opening the door, shooting ons, closing the door, and like the
A classic gameplay.
yeah, the cowardly boring gameplay like that. I think the fun aspect is the you can make a map which is good for speed running if it has enough
Yeah.
health. You don't have to rely on luck way too much or wait a lot of time for like the lift or just sit there and shoot rockets for all the Hell Knights to die. That
Hmm.
like that kind of like that stuff.
Yeah, I think you've tested for me a few times now with my wads, and I think you always tell me to speed lifts up, actually.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's much you can enjoy while you're in the lift, unless there's some scenery in it.
That's true.
Then it's okay.
So you talk about speedrunning a decent amount, or making maps that you can speedrun. Do you nearly always have like speedrunners in mind when you make your maps?
I try to, yeah. I'm not. I don't consider myself a great speedrunner. I think I'm. Well, uh, can't really sell for myself, right? But I think I'm okay with speedrunning, but not that great.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to make something that I just could run through myself. It, which is not the case in some for some maps. They sometimes you just can't make a good map, which is both good for speedrunning and has some sort of atmosphere in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you do have to like slow the player down a bit. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like if you look at the Rush Map 12, it has like that lift at the start.
Hmm.
That's it's there for scenery, not for the gameplay. So you have to wait like 20 seconds for it to go down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you tested that map, I would have thought you would have told yourself to speed the lift up.
Well, I just use the speed up option. That's it.
Yeah, that's true.
I actually used to speed up my game quite a lot when I came to lifts. So
Yeah, I think I do that now as well sometimes. Uh, with No Yeah, what was the goal for that project? Were you guys trying to capture sort of what Nirvana had done?
well, I can speak for myself. I just wanted to make some quirky, interesting new maps.
Hmm.
Like go either for the new experience which you can make in Doom, or something that only a speedrunner can figure out, like
Right.
or
And
just something funny.
yeah. And do you tend to like doing sort of things with voodoo closets and stuff in Boom, like creating uh weird voodoo contraptions and things to make things work in Boom that maybe people haven't seen before?
Well, not really. I think voodoo doll conveyors are quite annoying. I think.
Well, it's interesting that you've ended up making most of your major projects for Boom, because I know that you've used ZDoom quite a lot in the past. What sort of made you end up being more of a Boom mapper in the end?
Uh, the restrictions Boom provide actually, because if you start using ZDoom, you would eventually start using all the features it provides,
Hmm.
and it will take a lot of time to finish the map.
Right.
It's not really bad, but I think if I want to finish something, I'd rather start using Boom or Vanilla.
Hmm. I think you also, I think you have like a programming background and stuff, so I had sort of expected at some point to see like a UDMF project with a lot of ACS or something involved, but
I have made a UDMF map before
Hmm.
in freak mapping. You know that competition we had in RDC.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, but uh, the main reason I don't really do that because yeah, I would never probably finish the map if I start using it.
Uh-huh. Uh. So when you, because you talk about liking making stuff for speedrunners, do you tend to sort of build in speedrun strats? Like, are you thinking about how a speedrunner might route your map when you're making it, or do you think that it's better when speedrunners have to figure out how to route the map themselves?
I think speedrunners would should do that themselves. I think for myself, like I can find a road for myself,
Mm-hmm.
which might be slower or worse, or you know, there's a lot of stuff in Doom you can't really expect uh, the speedrunners not to break your map one way or another.
Right. And also, I think, yeah, I suppose part of the like fun of speedrunning in general is uh trying to break the map and like trying to create a route yourself by doing that.
Yeah.
And I
Also, some speedrunners like different stuff, so you
yeah,
can't really appease them all. If you're like, I want to appease them all, and you can't really, you really can't.
yeah,
Yeah, that's not possible. There will be always stuff like which something someone will find annoying.
that's true. Uh, so I used to watch you stream mapping a lot. I used to really enjoy those streams actually. And I know you're like you're extremely quick at putting maps together. Is sort of one of the things that made me sort of enjoy watching you stream in the first place. What are sort of the first things you try to do when starting a new map in the editor?
The very first thing I make is a cube, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, I usually have some ideas for the map, like the other how it should look overall.
Uh-huh.
Uh, in the past, I would draw my maps on paper,
Oh, okay.
like every part of it. I will like make some notes what I want to make here, and because Deep Sea didn't have a 3D view, it was interesting experience
Uh-huh.
to so you make the map but you can't look at it because it's just like a thin paper.
Yeah.
I guess once I started using Doom Builder and like had a 3D view, I stopped using the paper, and I really can't really think how can I use it right now.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, because I used Doomcad 95, which may have been even worse than Deep Sea, I think. And it also had no visual mode. So
Yeah,
a lot of the other thing was that it meant that you had to be able to picture all the heights for rooms, and you had to manually input all your textures. You had to do everything, and then if you ever wanted to look at it, you had to go in and test in game in order to actually do it, which was
yeah.
terrible. But I think it does using those older programs. I think for me, it made me a lot more patient at mapping when I got to Doom Builder.
I think it also is quite nice to have experience of making a map there you can't really look at the map itself. So you're
Yeah,
like thinking like which height should be in this room, and you put something together, and then you're looking at the map in the game, and it looks completely different from what you imagined.
yeah.
That's one of the aspects that also is quite interesting.
Well, scale was
And
really difficult to picture, especially because I was a lot younger then too. So like
Yeah,
you would usually I would end up with these gigantic rooms because it was so hard to picture how big things were just from the lines.
most of the time I had a completely different, like the opposite problem.
Oh,
My
okay.
rooms would be like cramped and small.
Uh-huh. Do you said you planned everything out on paper. Did that include like encounters and stuff? Do you generally prefer to have your encounters like your monster placement figured out before you start making geometry, or do you think about like the monster placement as you're building?
I tried different approaches. I can't really say which one is better.
Hmm.
Uh, but usually it's better to incorporate fighting in geometry. So, like making the room and then adding enemies in it. This way, you can, in fact, change a shape of the room quickly if you think like this is way too cramped,
Hmm.
or you can like extend the room with monster closets or something like that. Because if you're making the map first and then adding the monsters, you might not have enough room for changes.
Yeah, exactly. So, how extensive would you say were your sort of pre-planned drawings then? Was it like the entire map, all the monsters and everything, or was it just the basic layout?
Well, it's usually like half of a map, and then I would like add something to it because I felt like this is not enough. I should add something to it.
Right. Okay. Uh, so I wanted to ask about Rush 2 because I think it's still unfinished. Um, and I was curious, like, if that project would ever sort of be finished or if you were sort of done with Rush 2.
I can't really say myself right now. I'm not really motivated to make anything right now for like past years. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of got burnt out, I think.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
I kind of want to, but at the same time, I had some great ideas for the later Rush 2 maps, but that would require me to sit and draw stuff for like maybe a month.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Well,
something very gigantic I want to make, but at the same time, I don't really want to because there were some gigantic maps in the past I made, and they take a lot of time.
mm-hmm. Yeah, they can be pretty draining. But
Yeah,
I mean, I know there would be a lot of interest for Rush 2 because Rush is I really do think it has like a pretty special place for Slaughter people in their heart as like this great entry point for a lot of people coming into the genre, and I do think it kind of puts fun above difficulty in a lot of ways that maybe some WODs don't, where they're like entirely focused on difficulty, which I really like about Rush. So obviously I would really like to see Rush 2 finished.
I want to ask you something. If you have played the maps I've made for Rush 2,
I
do you
think
think it's a good sequel?
I think I've played I think I've played a few of them. I don't think I've actually played through all of them. Uh, but the ones that I did play, I do. Yeah, definitely. I guess difficult question to answer on
Nice.
this spot.
Yeah, the one of the reasons I'm hesitating is because I think it might not be really worth the name, and I might just
Mm,
like stick together some other maps I have
yeah,
and just release it as a different, kind of pivot.
yeah. Well, I think Rubik's had he had similar problems with Stardate 20XD7 and 20XD6 because he really only sort of named them the same thing because of the palette, because they were purple, but he thinks of those two projects as like completely separate. And he said, he's kind of regretted naming them the same thing because people have certain expectations and stuff. So I think maybe you know, it's understandable
Yeah,
for you to have the same feelings about Rush too.
yeah. Well, I kind of try to actually make them feel closer to. Okay, if someone watched the development of it, they would see like me nerfing map one every release of a new version
Right.
of Rush 2.
Well, you were saying that you didn't think you could like you didn't think you could make Rush these days because you feel like you're maybe a bit too good at the game and would make it a bit too difficult. I wonder if maybe with Rush 2, if you wanted to recapture that, you could have like a slightly different testing process and have like uh maybe some like more entry level players coming in and testing the maps and seeing how they deal with it and nerfing down to them for difficulty or something.
Well, I kind of expected people to play maps as I post them, but they don't really come into the thread, and it's mostly me just posting new versions.
Yeah, I do
So
think there's a
yeah,
bit of a thing these days of like waiting for full releases, especially because a lot of people stream them or they play them on YouTube or whatever. It does seem like a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'll just wait until like it's finished or until there's like an RC1 for the whole WOD or whatever." So I do think there's like a bit less of people coming in and being like, "Here's a demo for your map," like they used to be. But, but yeah, I would say that in terms of like waiting for the WOD, people would definitely be interested in Rush 2 coming out. I can say that much.
well, maybe in a year or two. I don't know.
I'll annoy you like you annoyed Skepticist to finish it.
Oh no, skepticist. I'm not talking with skepticist anymore. By the way,
You annoyed him too
that's
much.
yeah, no, that's not really the case, but I just thought like that. I should say that.
uh,
Yeah, I'd like to see skepticist come back and make something new.
yeah, definitely. Skepland is a really unique WOD, I think. Not a lot of
Yeah,
WODs that sort of can kill you so easily with like 3 monsters, as that one can. Uh, so sort of, I suppose, like most of your recent maps have been like collaborations and community projects, like in the last few years. Like I had a layout of yours that I ended up using for Flotsam, and then there was another map as part of Haste that you did. Are you just overall sort of less interested in doing solo releases now? Would you still be interested in like doing community project stuff?
the Noe maps, for example, were quite easy to make, so I made them.
Right.
The Flotsam, well, I don't really remember anything about it, to be honest. I think it was a really old map, isn't it?
It was some layout you put together really quickly and then you sent it to me and you were like, do something with this, and then it ended up in
Yeah,
Flotsam.
and I never got the map back. Yeah.
Yeah.
The switch room to map is also quite old,
Hmm.
and Old Gold is also quite old. It was like 2014, and that's a switch room too. So yeah, that in 2020 I haven't made. Well, I have made some maps. I was posting them in the speedrun Discord. Uh, One of the maps was eventually picked by Insane Gazebo,
Yep.
and he like made it look much better. Well, oh yeah, I made a map for Doom board projects.
Oh, yep, yep.
Yeah, that's my like the only map I really made in
Hmm.
the last. like 2 years.
The rest were just sort of scraps you had lying around, I guess.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's, that's it.
So do you think do you have any more scraps lying around that you you might make into maps, or if you were going to work on anything, do you think it probably would be Rush 2?
Yeah, I have a map which I'm struggling to put into Rush 2. It's finished, but it's not mine, by the way.
Right.
It's a demonologist map.
Uh-huh.
Well, I've made like the mini maps, which I was talking about before, which I posted in the. Uh, well, I actually sent them to you.
Was this for
If
Haste?
you
I
remember.
think they were in that Discord.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
one of the maps was in haste. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think I
but
remember.
it was quite fun to just make some uh, maps with vanilla textures. But eventually, I burnt out again. So yeah, I'm taking a break.
Yeah, it happens a lot with
For
Doom
as
making
long as it
mapping games.
takes.
Well, I suppose that brings me to the final question of the podcast. I ask everybody this question. Uh, I'm not sure if you've listened to any of the other ones, have you?
No, I actually haven't listened because, well, I first heard of the podcast from you.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good because now I get like a good organic I get a true answer to this question without you having to like listen to the other ones, I think. Uh what is your favorite Doom monster and why?
That's Archwell, of course.
Okay. Well, you are named. Are you named after the Archvile? Is that where this comes from?
Well, no.
No.
Uh, I don't really like my nickname, but yeah, it happened to be the. It's not related. It's
Okay.
kind of related, but not really. that's
Okay.
that's what I can say. Uh, I like Archwell because it's like one of the most interesting enemies.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it's been. I think I want to say it's been the most common answer. The Archvile.
Well, it's either an Archwell or a Cyberdemon.
We haven't had Cyberdemon yet. Cyberdemon is obviously a very good one. But what do you sort of like specifically about the Archvile?
Its ability to resurrect enemies.
Yeah.
So it's a big threat in some cases. So it's like a Archvile. Putting an Archvile is like one of the most dynamic difficulty uh, abilities you can do as a mapper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to pick the words. Uh,
No, I get what
so
you
yeah,
mean.
if you put the enemy into a field with a lot of enemies, like the field of dead enemies, then it will become a really high threat.
Hmm.
Or if you like put them into a small room, then it's not a threat at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's a cover, of course. If there's no cover, it's just annoyment.
Yeah. So
Uh,
it's like yeah, when you put an Archvile in, there's just a lot of different things you can do basically with the space that the Archvile
yeah,
occupies, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And cybers are the same way actually. They
Hmm.
might feel like just a brute who shoots rockets, but if you put them into a crowd of enemies, it's becoming a different kind of aspect of gameplay. It's not really becoming the threat; it's becoming like your friend,
Yeah.
you know. So like in fighting is one of the most interesting things.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And I would definitely, for the record, having not actually said this, but the Cyber Demon is probably my favorite enemy for that reason. Because
Yeah,
infighting, I think, is maybe the most interesting thing about Doom combat to me. Uh, and you know, the Cyber Demon is the big one for that. Uh, but
It's
yeah,
it's hard. It's kind of hard question, If
yeah,
I can tell about cool stuff about pretty much all the enemies except for like hit scanners.
the
They're
zombie man. Yeah,
they're kind of not really interesting. There's not much you can do about them.
I really want
Like Arach,
somebody to say zombie man is their favorite enemy and
I,
give
th-
a
I
good
think
reason.
like no, I think no one said about Arachnotron, for example.
No, no Arachnotron yet. I thought maybe
Yeah,
Benjo would say Arachnotron because he does use them quite well, but no.
yeah, it's a really interesting enemy if you put them into the right spot. And Mankubai, of course, as well.
Yep, skill source said Mancubus. That was his favorite. It's a pretty good one. Arachnotrons and Mancubus are difficult to use because of their size a lot of the time, but they can be really interesting enemies, especially for like slaughter encounters, I think.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
Well, Archvile, definitely a solid answer. And yeah, thanks for coming on. It was great to have you on, and it was really interesting hearing about sort of the Russian Doom community and that side of it in the early days, because I didn't really obviously know a lot about it, having not sort of been to the forums because I don't speak Russian. Um, so yeah, that was cool to hear about, and Rush and New Gothic Movement 2. Always been a really big fan of your maps, and hope the mapping
Thanks.
streams come back one day. Hope to see Rush 2 completed eventually. That would be great too. But no pressure, obviously.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for calling as well.
Yeah, no, it was great to
That
talk to
was
you.
quite fun.
Yeah, a very enjoyable chat. Thanks again, and I'll see everybody for the next episode. Goodbye.
All right. See ya.
See ya.